morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Still doing some little housekeeping here. I forgot to preload my posts on Blue Sky. If you don't know what Blue Sky is, it's a Twitter clone. A lot of people are moving over to it as a result of Elon Musk's unfettered way with with what used to be Twitter, and so we're gonna we too here at Light Thief Productions are going to be concentrating more on other avenues of distribution. But we're live on Twitch, we're live on Facebook, we're live on YouTube, and we are live on Live Push, with all good venues to watch the show on a regular basis, and feel free to tune in to any of them as your heart desires. We always cross post this to other places, but those are the ones that are easy enough to live stream to directly. So welcome to the show. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. I think, despite everything that's happened today in the past week or two, we've got a great show for you. And I think you'll enjoy it. We're going to be talking, everyone is sick of liberals, or how I learned to love the bomb. I admit the human element seems to have failed us here, says General Buck Turgidson. If you don't know who General Buck Turgidson is, you might have been living under a rock the last few years, but it's a fun reference. Look it up. I'm going to bring on screen my guests and allow them to introduce themselves. Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Chris. Let's start with Steve. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Hi, my name is Steve Geisert. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a theater director in the Philadelphia area and also a political junkie. Um, Pretty much it. Is there anything else we needed?
No. Chris, please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Hey everybody, name's Chris. I'm a union stagehand, touring professional in the entertainment industry, work in film. Pretty much anything you need built in the entertainment industry, I do. I'm also, as Steve said, a bit of a political junkie, aficionado, whatever the term is. Pronouns are he, him, they, them, whatever you prefer. It doesn't really matter to me.
All right. Welcome to the show, guys. I'm glad to have you. We're gonna talk, like I said, about this election. Why did Trump win? But before we get into that, I wanted to talk to Steve. Steve, we were talking, about the arts and like what we could do in the next year, next 4 years. A lot of us are still planning. A lot of us in production are still planning what to do. What you had a couple of thoughts on an idea for some shows coming up in the spring, maybe over the next couple of seasons. What are you thinking?
I'm gonna walk backwards a little bit and say, the arts serve as a mirror to the society. Let us see where we are, because obviously, if you look at this election, we really thought we were going another place, as we did in 2016. And what the fuck
Yeah,
is the only
and
best way to, however you spell that, and so we need to look at ourselves. We need the arts, even though they're going to get attacked. All the more reason we need them to tell us what's going on with us.
yeah, I mean, I was talking
So badly.
I was talking a little bit last week about, like people had better be prepared. We are not going to have the federal funding for the arts. The probably the what little federal arts support we get is probably going to go away in the next year, maybe year and a half.
Sure.
Um,
Absolutely. We expect that. So for me, again, I'm a stage director, and so I'm always looking for ways to talk to people. One of the things I mentioned to James in the past is I'm a big fan of Bertolt Brecht, and he was a communist, and he really wanted people to watch after they see his plays. He wanted to go out and riot in the streets and overthrow the government. I'm not into that necessarily. We saw January 6th already, and bunch of people got lied to and believed it. And that's, if you believed it, I can understand where you felt, but they were lied to, and that's fine. But we need to get ourselves to figure out where we are, what we're doing. And like one of the things that I was planning on doing, and it's probably past now, and this is what I mentioned to you, James, is that the musical of I can't think, Man of La Mancha. And I thought, that would be perfect with Trump being him, Cervantes, and various people could play all those other roles and really tell the story of what that story really tells us. But that really is a pre-election conversation. We're there. We're not there anymore. We can't beat ourselves up about the election. We can only beat ourselves up about the next election and the next day and tomorrow. We can't focus on yesterday. Looking at yesterday doesn't can help us see what we're doing today and tomorrow. We can't just beat our breasts about yesterday. So when
Can
it
I
comes to
just jump in
projects
real
looking
quick?
forward, I don't know.
Can I
Go
just
ahead.
jump in real quick? And I just want to say, I love Man and La Mancha as a show, and the idea of doing it reframed with the cast of characters, as modern political and pop culture figures that way is a really interesting concept, and I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't get that, but I love the idea.
I,
Yeah,
I, I,
we may
uh,
still need it
I was
later
saying to
on.
somebody that I think that, even speaking against the kind of propaganda that we've gotten as a result. I mean, even before the election, but as a result of the election, speaking against that propaganda is somewhat of a a task that the man of La Mancha might take on. We don't have windmills to tilt at, but it certainly seems like going against all the propaganda is tilting at windmills, at least from my perspective. I find it very difficult. I find it very difficult to counter the propaganda. I encounter people now. It took them a couple days. I'll give them that. It took them like a week, but suddenly we have people saying things like, the title of this piece. Everybody's sick of liberals. Everybody, is everybody sick of liberals? I don't know. I'm a liberal.
I'm kind of thinking.
Um, I'm pretty liberal. I mean, all liberals are always sick of liberals.
Yeah.
That's pretty much a given. We police ourselves, but um,
They're a big tent, and they have to be a big tent. And so you're going to have people on the outside of this large tent, they're going to disagree with each other. When you look at the other party, they found a way to concentrate tighter and tighter and tighter, and now we're in one place. So it's easy to be together. I mean, I want to be in the big tent. My problem is that we've lost sight. We've kind of pushed some people out of the tent unconsciously, assuming they're still in with us. The working poor, the working class, racial issues. We've just made assumptions and ignored them, and we did this in 2016, and the Democratic Party I'm referring to, we ignored them and took them for granted. And guess what? COVID kind of threw the next election all over the place. And I don't think it was a good model, even though that's what you originally and I were talking about, is what the votes meant. But really looking at 2016, the trend hasn't changed. There was this humongous hiccup of COVID, but the path is still happening. We
Do
still
you
ignore.
do you think that I mean I want to push back on this idea, um, because obviously I don't agree with it. But I mean, somebody, Rick, posting on Facebook, Rick Lewis, he was our guest last week, did a pretty made a pretty convincing argument to me, um, about economic anxiety, about the ignoring of the quote unquote ignoring of the working class. Um, the again, Peter Birkenhead. I don't remember if I said this live or in pre-show, but Peter Birkenhead is a commentator. He's been posting about the election, and he's along the lines. So I admit, I think he's doing good work because of confirmation bias. He's along the lines of me. He thinks that it's kind of BS that everybody's saying, "Oh, the Democrats or Harris campaign didn't talk about economic things or didn't talk about anything except for pronouns and Latinx and
That's bullshit.
I honestly, I don't really recall hearing Kamala Harris talk much about trans issues that weren't, as part of like a anti Harris campaign ad.
Yeah,
It
great.
seemed like there were a couple of maybe individual interview clips or snippets that got sort of cut out and then plastered all over. Like, I'm a big football fan, so pretty much every commercial break it would be that one, and I'm sure you guys know the one I'm talking about.
I don't.
You want, okay, well, you don't watch football, but I was saying maybe you know the commercial, but the was
I
it
don't know.
you
Yeah.
vote for a president that's for Americans, not for, or Kamala Harris is a president for they them, not for,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and
So,
and it really
James,
it
let me
fixated
jump in
on
because
one specific kind of incident that wasn't indicative of her entire campaign. Is I guess what I'm getting at.
I want to say I misspoke, and what I meant to say was that it's that we it's not that we didn't say it, it's that we let the other side define the narrative, and the narrative
Yes, that is.
was, and we did that way back, and we still continue to fail. I'll tell you, my wife used to be she ran Move On in a tri-state area, and she learned that it's all about defining the narrative. And we have allowed them to define the narrative. When they say this is what we're talking about, they're not hearing us talk about what is important. And
well,
for
yeah, no, yeah, exactly what you're saying is true, I think. I think that is true. Like, and that's part of the propaganda. That's part of the propaganda
yes,
machine. Um, and you don't. The truth is, you don't get to control the narrative. No matter how many politicos think that they have the magic button to control the narrative, we don't control the narrative. Like, a lot of people talk about the media. I am the media. Like, I'm the people you're talking about. We're all artists. We all work in the arts. We are the media. We don't get to control what our audiences listen to. Like, we don't get to control what they hear. We can put out whatever message we want, but they hear what they want to hear.
well, let me explain. So when people ask Kamala Harris, okay, so are you going to do the same economic things that Biden did? Now that's a good catch or a setup question, because, well, okay, the inflation is bad, even though it's not, but people they wanted to go backwards, which almost never happens. And so what she should have said, in my personal opinion, is, look, there was a global pandemic. We were ready for a major depression. The only way to do it is to throw money, literally print money. It's what they did, the incentives. And when you do that, anybody who knows economics, when that happens, you always have inflation. You do. That's the cost. But would you rather have inflation, or would you rather have a Great Depression? That's what they should have said when they were asked the questions. Well, Yeah, well, not really much. I can't really think of anything. No, they should have thought that through. On the other hand, when it comes down to it, she didn't have much time to plan a strategy because it was a last minute thing, and that was a failure. That was a big failure there. But the point is, no, we did the right things because they did do the right things, but they didn't say, here's why that's the choice. Do you want a depression or do you want inflation?
They
And we have inflation is
I
going to
think
last for 4 to 6 years. We have to expect that. And people don't want to think long term. And unfortunately, we didn't push harder on that. They didn't push harder on that.
Well,
But
Steve, if I could just, I actually just disagree with you there a little bit. I think that, for one, people were pretty tired of the whole like pandemic thing. Like, even though it's very recent past, a lot of people are just kind of sick of talking about it, sick of
yeah,
hearing about it. And I personally, I think a better strategy for whoever the candidate, whether it was Harris or anybody, would have been to point at like the actual economic reality of what's going on in the world. If you look at global inflation right now,
way better.
9%. Domestically, it's 5. And now for this year, it's down back to what's considered healthy numbers of
And
2.5.
we're better than all
And I
the other
heard none of
countries.
that. I heard none of that from the
Right,
campaign.
right. We did better than all the other countries. We did the best out of anybody.
I mean,
And but that's the point. They didn't say that when they presented with the question, they didn't do that.
well,
That could have been the narrative.
here's the reason why that question is a good setup. Because the question you asked was, are you going to do the same things that Biden did economically? The reason it's a good setup from the right is because, yes, she should be doing the same things economically that Biden did. The problem is that the right has already sold its voter base on that this is a bad economy. It's not a bad economy. Yes, inflation drove prices up. Yes, billionaires got richer. Yes, the wealth gap increased. Yes, a lot of things happened that are not necessarily equitable in the economy recovering. But it's never going to recover equitably. Equitable movement happens when you have a healthy economy, because if you try and change things in the middle of a economy with runaway inflation, or you try and change things while the economy is doing poorly, you end up with a worse economy. So you can't make equality from a position of weakness. And that I heard, to your point, Chris, I heard from the campaign, we have lower inflation than anybody else recovering from the pandemic. And I heard these things because of the campaign. I wouldn't have heard them without the campaign. The problem is that information was already out there, in my opinion. The problem is the information was already out there from, whether it's Russian bots or just really good campaign rhetoric from the right. They have the idea out there. Hey, we're in a bad economy, and they have plenty of people driving lifted trucks, living in McMansions, agreeing with them.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, so I agree that at times they did touch on it. I guess from my perspective as somebody who like reads a lot about stuff, like I want a little bit more of like a data driven, a little bit more in depth, and I guess that's maybe that's a little bit unrealistic, especially given the average political and economic literacy of the American voter. But I think, on top of all that, by the time that Kamala Harris even took over the campaign, it was so deep into the election cycle that
Yeah.
there's probably just a certain level of fatigue. Like, I don't know about you, but in talking to people, it just seemed like everybody was so just absolutely tired of whether they were whatever side they were on. They were just tired of even hearing about it. So you kind of reach a point where there's not really inroads to be made because nobody has the attention span for it anymore.
I laugh because we're sitting here talking about the election, post-election.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I mean,
but also I was tired. I was personally tired of election coverage. I was tired of getting phone calls and text messages. I was tired of people knocking on my door.
That's by design. They once they got you their facts. Oh, stop. Okay, stop the show. It's like playing the musical chairs. Musical. Let's stop now. We've got everything in their heads. Stop. Get people tired of it. Get people to turn off. Which is a segue, James, for what I was talking about. Is that if you look at the 2020 election versus 2022, I'm looking at my notes here. Trump got 2 million votes. I'm just rounding to the million. 2 million fewer votes than in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Biden Harris, he had 81 million in 2020, 68 million. That's 13 million fewer votes she got. Trump got 2 million fewer. She got 13 million fewer. 15 million fewer people voted overall in the election, and 13 of those are on the Democratic side.
Right. Which
So
so
why?
I find this fascinating. Yes, and the why. And also this is why I wish politicos would stop spouting their bullshit, and why I'm on the line with Peter Birkenhead here, where I think that because one of the constant narratives is quote unquote gains that Trump had in this election. Trump didn't gain anything. Trump didn't gain jack shit. He just didn't lose as much as Harris did versus you know, or the DNC did, you know.
2 million fewer votes. Yeah. I mean, come on. But the question is, this is supposed to be a turnout election. If the Democrats turned out, she would win. Well, it ended up being a sit out election. It's not that they didn't turn out, they sat out. They didn't chose not to vote. And my hunch is that they were angry, they got confused and angry, or whatever the hell the reasons are. Who knows who they would have voted for, but they knew, let's just say they would have voted for her and did vote for Biden, but by choosing to sit out, they knew that they were helping Trump, but for whatever reason, they could not also vote for her. And there's so many arguments for why, but I don't care at this moment. It's about looking at the sheer numbers. Those are huge numbers. He won by 4 million votes. She got 13 million fewer than Biden did.
I think so. I think that the reasons are important. Where I think we break down in political analysis is a lot of people are trying to figure out why somebody would vote for Trump or why somebody would vote for Harris, or even the why somebody would vote cross party, and that's one thing that I think is a valuable it's valuable to bring up, and it's also ridiculous. So if you look at the numbers of cross party voters, traditionally over like the last 500 elections, nobody votes cross party. People pick a side and then they stick to it. So if you're a registered Republican, it was something like 98-99% of registered Republicans voted for Trump. Something like 98-99% of registered Democrats voted for Harris. That's where the show up election comes down to it. Like there are more registered Democrats in the country than there are registered Republicans. If all of the people that are registered vote, they're going to vote party line usually by a vast majority, and so they will win. Democrats would win every election if everybody showed up to vote. The problem is the Democratic Party, the DNC and the DCCC, use the same narrative, the same rhetoric, the same line of attack every single time. And then in the post-election coverage, everybody goes, well, it's because we were too woke. Did you hear anybody being woke in this election? Like, did you hear a single candidate go, actually trans care for teens is a great idea. Maybe we should be offering free trans care for teens in schools.
Honestly, James, I think very much the opposite is true. I think sort of to what Steve was saying earlier, like very early on in the cycle, and part of it had to do with not having a real primary. Part of it had to do with Harris kind of being foisted on us as the candidate late into the election cycle. But the very early on, the sort of the narrative and what we were going to talk about this election cycle got determined by the right. And so they were able to frame it as like, oh, it's about wokeness. Oh, it's about
Right.
this from their side. And then from the other side, from the DNC side, they did the thing they always do where they try and appeal to like the mythical undecided voter, which you were kind of on like
Agree.
who can't decide between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump? Like who's like sitting there like, I don't know.
Even if you're going to decide one way or the other, like you're just definitely going to decide one way or the other. You're not going to be in the middle. Like there's no middle
Right.
there.
But
It's
I
always
think
been a binary choice. Yeah, of course.
yeah, but I think what ended up happening with the DNC and Kamala Harris's campaign strategy is they started sort of kowtowing to again like these mythical undecided voters and trying to appeal to the quote unquote never Trump Republicans that were always just going to vote for a Republican candidate anyway. By doing things like campaigning on immigration reform, like that's not a winning strategy for the Democrats. It just isn't. If you care enough about that as an issue, you know who your guy is. So
Yep.
why instead of doing that, why not campaign on things that actually matter to Democratic voters we Biden during his term forgave something like $100 billion in student loan debt. I did not hear them mention that one time. Now I didn't watch every single speech that Kamala Harris gave.
No, I didn't hear it either, to be honest.
But like, how are you not screaming that from the rooftops? You forgave $100 billion.
That's and what I love about people who don't understand economics at all is that they go, well, you forgave $100 billion of debt. Who's going to pay for that? Nobody pays for that. That money, that nobody pays for that. It didn't cost a dime. In fact, it put
I
probably
know people who believe this. I know people. I've heard them tell me that, and they refuse to believe me when I tell them we're not paying for it. There's no tax coming to you, and whatever. Look. Here's
You know
what
what we are going to pay for is all the deportations, though.
Yes, we are. Yeah, that we will pay for, and the wall.
and all the lawsuits
Well,
that
Mexico's paying for the wall. Mexico's still going to pay for it.
Because we're not Mexican, so we're not paying for that. So, but here's what I think really happened. This goes back to 2016. This goes back to when actually Barack Obama, when he was running against Hillary Clinton and he won, and the next time around, they really wanted Hillary to be the nominee. And what they did, do you remember the whole super delegates thing?
yes.
Oh yeah.
Anytime somebody else would win, then but then she got a whole bunch of super delegates, which basically says, well, here's what the voters want, but we want this person. I think that soured the Democratic Party a lot because you know what the other party did? The Republicans, they were fair. They allowed this lunatic to come in. All the people who are now his supporters, from Lindsey Graham to Marco Rubio to everybody, all said this guy's crazy. He's unfit until he won. Like, oh, he's great. He's great. Pretend I didn't say that. But
Ted Cruz's wife is ugly, but I still think he's the best candidate.
Ted Cruz, right? Yeah. But the point is that they were fair. They fairly allowed their electorate, to choose their person, no matter how toxic it is, and they were fair. And I think that gave them a lot of credence for their voters to say, well, at least they were fair. Democrats were not fair. And because they had their chosen person. Now, here we go. When Biden chooses, now, in my opinion, I thought he gave a wink and a nod that he was going to run for one term. It was a wink and a nod. So I chose myself to hear it when he ran. And then whoever is going to be his vice president, he's going to groom that person to be the next person. It didn't happen. That's a mistake. But so there we go again. Now they're again choosing for us the person. And I think that has a lot to do with lack of turnout. They're angry about that.
Would you describe it as undemocratic?
One would think. One would think. Yes, isn't that ironic? Yeah.
I mean,
But yeah,
it happens. So this and what you're talking about happens at all levels of the DNC and DCCC. Um,
yes, it does.
it it
Yes, it does.
it's a very top-down organization led by people who just think that they know what's best, which is what Trump and the Trump campaign clued into many years ago. And I think is a valid criticism of the DNC and DCCC. You can't top down national politics.
All politics is local. That's the quote from Tip O'Neill. That's his famous quote, and he's right. He's right.
And you look even at Philadelphia. You look at Philadelphia's elections. The DNC and the DCCC sidelining progressive candidates, sidelining progressive district captains, sidelining any sort of progressive voice in politics here. Um, I find that abhorrent. I think that that's the problem. I think for all the people who are like celebrating because oh regular quote unquote regular people are sick of hearing about trans kids and sick of hearing about sick of legitimizing Hamas. God, I wish I could just sometimes I wish I could reach through the screen and like actually physically hurt people, but I'll use my words. You're idiots. And they're always gonna be idiots. Like that's just the thing. They're just always gonna be like. There's no educating them out of their vote. There's no the idea is to not alienate the people in your own party because again, as you know, if you look at statistics, you look at past elections, you even look at this past election, people vote for the candidate in their party. There are more registered Democrats than there are anything else.
Everything else is nibbling around the edges, and you can nibble around the edges for fun, for pleasure, but when it comes to winning elections, stop it. Stop making those the issue because they're not.
Right. Stop making people feel like you aren't going to represent their interests. Like if you survey Democrats, if you survey nationally, people are overwhelmingly in support of things like trans health care for youth. They're overwhelmingly in support of gay marriage. They're overwhelmingly in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
Yep.
Why is the DNC and DCCC running as fast and as far as they can from those kind of ideas?
Definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah, I think there's a almost a more sinister thing to it at play here as far as the DNC and everything goes too, is a lot of the candidates that would aggressively sort of defend and pursue those kind of social issues are also the kind of candidates like a Bernie Sanders or any of the, what do they call it, the five or whatever,
Oh,
AOC, Rashida Tlaib,
quad.
The squad.
squad, that's what it is, the squad. But they're also, as part of their platform, are very, very aggressively economically populist. And I don't mean populist in like the right wing, like
Yeah, true.
true immigrants way. I mean it in like the actually like, hey, let's help people get a leg up. And it recently, I don't know if you guys saw this tweet from the Senator Chris Murphy out of Connecticut. It's been making the rounds on social media, but it's part of a. He goes, we don't listen enough. We tell people what's good for them, and when progressives like Bernie aggressively go after the elites that hold people down, they are shunned as dangerous populists. Why? Maybe because true economic populism is bad for our high income base. I mean, that kind of sums it up for me, and that kind of sums up why so many people I feel like are disillusioned with the DNC that would otherwise vote for the Democratic Party candidate.
Is it So, I
It feels
mean, is it a perfect storm election, or is there like one issue? Is it just economics, or is it economics plus international politics plus whatever?
I think we've
I
come down to the fact that it is exactly what we've kind of boiled down to here. It's we've been telling people from the top down who their candidate is, what we stand for, rather than listening to them.
I think it personally, I think it's because the DNC doesn't actually care whether they win an election. And I don't mean that figuratively, I mean that very literally. The people who fund them are the same people who fund the Republican Party in a lot of cases. You go to opensecrets.org, it's
Yeah.
all right there for you to see. And you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to them who's running the government. They're still going to get those campaign donations, and they're still going to get the insider information that they need for people like Nancy Pelosi, who I know is like the poster child for the insider trading stuff. But like, they're going to be wealthy, they're going to be powerful, whether or not they control the majority of power, and they're not going to feel the negative effects of losing these elections. People like us are, and not even me. Like I'm a pretty privileged person. I'm going to be relatively insulated from a
I
lot of
mean,
the
even
worst.
I'm going to be insulated. What the way in which I'm going to feel this election is not the same as some of my neighbors, and that's
Yeah, my
unfortunate.
trans sister is going to care a lot more about this than I,
Right.
per on a personal level
Yeah,
is what.
and I think you're absolutely right that the big moneyed people give to both parties because they're hedging their bets. They want to make sure they want to be seen as they don't want to be seen as not contributing. So they contribute to both. They don't really care. You're right. And I've heard this argument that you made, and I've heard it before, and there's a lot of credence to that idea that um the the parties don't care. The real policy, they don't care. They're and the argument was that they were in cahoots. I don't know about cahoots, at
Yeah,
least
that's a little extreme.
coordination. There's no coordination, but it's all the same. When it comes down to it, we're going to be okay.
Yeah,
And
I don't think
we
it's
need to make the
coordinated so
party.
much as their interests coalesce naturally.
We want our voters to be happy, so they choose us.
Right.
But that's it. That's pretty much it. Well, we fought the good fight for you, but we're still okay because we're in power. We're rich, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So does it come down to over the next 4, 8, 20 years? How do we? So there's a lot of talk amongst, especially the Black community and the gay community, um, the queer community as a whole, not just the gay community, about self care, not necessarily, but community care, community efforts to take care of our social spheres. I'm wearing a Black Panthers shirt. Not ironically, I'm wearing a Black Panthers shirt because the Black Panthers were key to getting a lot of the Black community through desegregation and Jim Crow.
Yeah.
The federal government quite literally abandoned huge swaths of America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and the Black Panthers and other groups of community care helped shepherd those communities through that.
They picked up the slack. Absolutely.
Well, I think there's also, when you bring up the Black Panthers, there's unfortunately this image, and unfortunately, there's this image of what the Black Panthers are, where it's a bunch of black men toting around guns and like
Right.
following
Right.
cops around, and like yeah, some of that did happen, but like what the Black Panthers actually did in their community was make sure everybody had food, make
Yep.
sure everybody had access to medicine, make sure everybody had diapers for their children, like that type of
And the
community.
and the Black Panthers that were toting around guns and following cops were doing so because those were dirty cops. Like,
Oh yeah, no, I'm not
Yeah,
saying
they
they
were
were
getting
wrong for doing
decimated.
that either. I'm just saying that was, that was like a small portion of the massive impact that they had in supporting and building up community that doesn't really get recognized because people are so uninformed about it. That's all I was getting at.
No, I always, yes, the modern Panthers aren't what they were. And yes, politics was able to sideline the Black Panther movement and create a new Black Panther movement that wasn't led by people who had the same concerns that the original Black Panthers did. And yes, there have been bad things that have happened because of the Black Panthers, but on the general whole, I would say the Black Panthers did a whole lot of good, and that is the part of the Black Panthers that I think is important to recognize and model going forward. I think that community efforts are important, no matter how many times I have an argument with somebody online who is a leftist left of me and tells me that I'm not doing a good job because I'm not doing enough work. I do think it is important. I wonder.
Are you not posting on Reddit often enough for their liking?
No. So like, I'm on the edge of like, I'm a propagandist. I will go ahead and say that. Like, that is my contribution to the left. Like, that's the best I can do is create a platform and get voices out there. I am the guy that goes, okay, here's the message, here's how we communicate it. Like, that's all I'm good at. I'm not good at, like, I can lift boxes and farm, but I'm not as good at it as somebody else. So this is my lane. I try and stick to it, and just as in all leftist spaces. By the way, anybody who's never been in a leftist space, before you start coming into leftist spaces, just realize you're gonna get a lot of pushback no matter what you're trying to do. You're not doing it right. Just that's the end of the story. No matter what you're doing, you're not doing it right. Anyway, I say that somewhat jokingly. It is real. I've been kicked out of leftist spaces for being who I am and refusing to change. And I'm a pretty lefty leftist. Like, I'm not I'm not
You're not
center.
a true leftist until you've been kicked out of a leftist. It's a rite of passage.
Badge of honor.
So anyway, all that being said, these groups, these smaller groups, the community aid, the social groups, don't have influence over national or international things. So what do we do about climate change? What do we do about, I was just speaking with my daughter's, the head of my daughter's preschool, and I was like, what do we do for all these little kids? Just the climate damage of the next 4 years, and that's going to have knock-on effects for at least 20 to 30 years after that.
So before we get onto that question, I do just want to add one last thing that I think is pertinent to what we were talking about, leftist and leftist space, is that is one thing that I feel like the right does a lot better, is they don't shun each other. Like, there's no ideological purity test because in a lot of ways they have no real ideology. And so it's a very welcoming environment. Like, I've seen a lot of like think pieces done on what it's like to go to a Trump rally, and they're like, it's like a Grateful Dead concert. Everybody's just having a good time. And that's terrifying to me. But at any rate, to what you're saying about what are we gonna do about just the climate impacts for future generations and things like that. And man, that's a really tough question to kind of answer, isn't it? I think the best thing, like, my political philosophy, being an anarchist, is you start from the ground up, you start from grassroots. So one of the best things you can do is, maybe you start a community garden, and a lot of that stuff isn't going to make a huge impact. It's not going to mitigate climate crisis, but over a long enough window, okay, well, you have a community garden growing here. Maybe that causes the next neighborhood. Maybe they want a community garden, and now you just have more and more and more community gardens, and now you have less dependency over the course of maybe a decade or 2 decades of importing food from across the country or across the globe. Like there's that meme of like pears grown in Argentina shipped to Thailand for packaging and then sold in the United States. Like maybe a little bit of less of that can happen if we start growing more food in our own community and stuff like that.
I agree. We have to get back to starting locally. Go local, work the other direction because top down has been failing us. Oh, excuse me. I'm sitting on something that just fell.
Sorry.
Anyway,
I just what I worry. I wonder. I know that people have lived through worse. I know that people have experienced worse. Have been there. There's definitely been worse, and people have thrived even in those situations. How and I've gotten the pushback to my thoughts, by other people of, well, you're a very capable, strong, intelligent person. You can definitely survive this. Do I want to? Is the question. Do I want to survive this? Do I want to move to Spain and spend the next 40 years touring the EU on a digital workers visa?
yeah, but as liberals, the whole point, in my opinion, is it's not about you, just about you personally. I don't think any of us here are thinking about ourselves personally, because like as you guys said, and myself included, we'll be fine personally. I'll survive, but it's not about ourselves necessarily. It's about others, and we always think of others. That's what this party does that the other one has no interest in. And progressives are always thinking about others because, in my opinion, it's all about, are we progressing as mankind, person kind? Are we progressing forward? Are we standing still? Or are we going backwards? And we think about other people, the next people, our neighbors. Because in our opinions, speaking for us, when everybody's happy, we're happy.
Sure, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah,
You know.
precisely.
It feels like the other side is very much we're not happy until you're not happy.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I had a long conversation with a lady because her one of her kids and his group of friends dressed up as Trump and his Secret Service detail and a sniper.
He didn't do the bloody ear, did he?
Yeah, he did actually. He
Did he? Oh my God.
And so they dressed up as Trump in the Secret Service detail and the sniper, and one of them was a January 6th insurrectionist, and they went out like this for Halloween in South Philly, and a lot of people pushed back on that, especially once it became a meme, like some idiot talk show host like me posted it to his whatever social media, probably like Instagram or something, and said that this is pre-election, obviously Halloween, and he said like this is Trump's back, baby, the blah blah blah, and using these little kids as a political tool. That caused a lot of pushback. People said, like, this is bad parenting. I wouldn't give those kids candy. Like, some of them said we should give them candy with razor blades. I'm like, no, all right. Let's back up.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah,
that's good.
Let's back up here. And so, I said in my response that it is bad parenting. Like, you should think about what your kids are doing, like, and encourage them to model good behavior. Like, right? Because that's all 12-year-old boys are doing, is they're modeling the people that they think are the coolest and best. Like, that's all they're gonna do. They're gonna model the people that they think have the most power or the awesomest, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. They're gonna try and emulate what they think is the best representative of the best. So these kids think that Trump is the best, and that's probably because in their surroundings they have adults who support Trump and think that Trump is great. And admittedly, from the outside of the Trump movement, like Trump is a enigmatic, powerful guy. He gets things the way he wants them. He doesn't let people tell him how to do things. He doesn't let people get away with, anything. And oftentimes, cheats people out of things. That's a pretty cool guy. I mean, like if I was a 12-year-old, yeah, I want to be able to take candy from my friend and not get punished for it.
And he's entertaining, don't forget. And that's the key. He's entertaining. And people think it just have politics as entertainment, They don't see that it has actual effects on their real
Right,
lives.
and also those adults.
At like a third grade level, which
Yes,
that's the level that unfortunately a lot of people read at. So there's
and
that.
they don't think long term either anymore.
Right. So I had this long conversation with her because she called me and, I had publicly said, like, I will talk to anyone, and I actually will. So, again, I say to if anybody who's conservative is watching this for some reason, maybe you're hate watching it. It's fine. Or trying to get details to, like, dox me. Look, my address is online. Like, people know where I live. You just have to ask around. Like, ask around South Philly. You'll find out where I am. Most people know me. And or you can just go to Center City and look for me. Like, I'm pretty recognizable. Anyway, I will have a conversation with anybody. I have had in-person conversations with, like, people I completely disagree with. And I love those conversations because I get insights into what people are thinking. This woman didn't like the main difference between how I approach parenting and how she approaches parenting, or even life in general, is what you were saying, Steve. Is I try to think about the other people who are in my sphere, and I care about how they're doing because I think that the better that we're all doing, the better people are going to treat me, the more money they're going to spend with me, the more stuff that, is good is happening around me, the more I will enjoy my own life. And her take on everything was that, well, Bidenomics is causing me to not have any money. I have to work 3 jobs. I'm raising 3 kids on my own, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was very introspective, very, I don't know, like a non-mean word to say it, but it was very
Trying not to say selfish. Yeah,
self-serving. Yeah, I don't know any other way to say that. Yes, and I get laughed out of the room though when I point this out. I get laughed out of the room when I say, the party of people that cares what happens to other people is what progressives are, and what Democrats should be. Like, Democrats aren't, but progressives are. And how do you, I don't know that you can convince people to care about other people. How do you convince people that other people matter?
I think look historically, it has happened. We're just in a trend that started in the 80s with the me generation, the Gordon Gecko, the Reagan thing, where we start thinking of ourselves only, lifting ourselves up by the bootstraps, all the other crap. But in the long run, people do learn, they can learn, again, getting back to community, getting back to local. When you contribute and bring up your community, you end up, even if you're in a good position yourself, you end up doing better than you would have. And to boot, other people are doing well also. But that's the point. You end up doing better if you lift yourself. Because another way is if you lift everybody else. If you lift just yourself, now you have to build walls around your house to protect yourself from all the people who are angry and poor and all that. But I don't want to build a fence around myself. I want to take down all the fences and make everybody happy so I don't need to. And I'm still doing well and probably better. But that's just, you know, I think that's a progressive
How,
outlook.
Chris,
And it
how do you take
historically it changes all the time.
Chris? How do you take the union ethos and make people realize that it actually applies to more than just union labor?
So it's interesting. There's a couple of things I wanted to kind of address in what we were talking to before. But if you're asking specifically about the framework of the union, and this ties into what I was going to say is, so when I see people in my local that very openly support Trump and voted for Trump, you know, we were talking about people and their framework and like being self-centered or something. In a lot of cases, they aren't necessarily that. Like I'm talking about people who will run fundraisers for other members of the local when one of their kids is sick or injured, or will when somebody passes away, we'll all get together and we'll throw some money towards their family to help them bury that person. But I think, within that though, there is sort of this in group of like, oh, they're in the local, they're one of us. You know what I'm saying? And I think what ends up kind of happening once you get to like the national political level is things get so stratified and so like so big, and people have a hard time like people have a hard time relating to like the Honduran who walked here with the clothes on their back because we destabilized their government. A lot of cases they don't understand that that's the reason. They think they just want to come here and take all our benefits or whatever that we don't really get much of anyhow. But I think what ends up happening is, well, within the union you have this kind of like in group of people where like, oh, you're a member, you're part of the family, you've paid your dues, and I think when you're talking about, especially with like foreign policy and immigration policy, which seem to be a big hot topic issue, and has been for the past, but for as long as I've been politically aware, really, these have been issues. um, because they don't view those people as people in some level, or at least not people on the same standing. Oh, they're foreigners. Oh, they're not one of us. They're from some other dirty country where people aren't as good or whatever. Oh, they're poor because that's just their culture makes them poor, not because American imperialism has robbed their country of all of its wealth and destabilized the entire political system.
I'm glad you're aware. Yeah,
I throw something in here. Here's a
yeah.
quote I posted yesterday on Facebook. In 2022, undocumented immigrants contributed $97 billion in taxes without receiving any direct benefits in return. Meanwhile, between 2018 and 2022, corporations like Tesla, GM, Amazon, T-Mobile, blah, 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 earned billions in profits, yet paid no federal income taxes. So, and that's people don't know that because the narrative is telling us something else.
Yes, and I will repeatedly and forever not understand how people don't realize that communities with a healthy stream of immigration are the ones that do the best economically,
And have the best food.
and have the best food. Yeah.
Yes.
Like I remember in 2016 when Trump threatened that there'd be a taco truck at every corner. I was like, that is the
Great.
best
That's
thing that could
perfect.
possibly happen.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want a taco truck on it? Anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining me this morning. We're gonna outro the show here. I really appreciate you joining me. Peter, any last thoughts? Sorry, Steve, any last thoughts about upcoming art? How do we do art going forward in the next 4 years?
I think we have to think about what the things we're thinking about, reflect on ourselves, what we're thinking about, why we're thinking about this when we should look at ourselves. And it's I can't say it generically enough. It's just generic right now. We have to get local, have to look at ourselves and see where we've gone, how we've gone awry. I think we've gotten too top down. The DNC, the Democratic Party has gotten too top down. And by the way, I need to add, I'm a local, I'm a union person too.
Solidarity.
I'm on the board of my local, so yeah. So I absolutely, we just need to really look at ourselves, and that means a lot of art needs to really introspect and figure out where we're going.
Chris, where do we go for the next 4 years? How do we keep on keeping on, so to speak?
I mean, I listen, I just gotta kind of echo what Steve said and just, stick to my guns here, man. I think that the nature of American politics has gotten so top down and so dissociated from the other people in your community. I think we need to double down on, getting to know your neighbor, organizing a street cleanup, growing food in your community, finding out who in your neighborhood needs a little help getting around, needs a little bit of help getting to a doctor if they're elderly, that kind of thing. And the anarchist philosophy is the way you get to a world without government is you make government obsolete because people are just taking care of each other, so you don't need this overarching entity to do that.
Right,
And
but you don't disassemble government willy nilly to get rid of
no,
it.
no, you don't take the bottom Jenga brick out and hope everything is
Right.
standing up. You got it's I fight for the world that I hope to exist one day, knowing that I'll never get to live in it. Kind of like the true wisdom is a man who plants a tree knowing he'll never get to sit in its shade. That's kind of my political philosophy. I realize that as bleak as it may feel sometimes, and I'm not going to be able to affect anything in the next 5, 10, maybe even 20 years. That's going to really meet the level of the world that I hope to live in. But if we can keep things going in that direction and keep doubling down on that and just show people that it's the right way by doing it, then I think people will eventually come around. So I think that's the only way forward.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't despair. Don't despair. Stay strong.
It's hard as a person of color, as somebody who's lived in places where he's definitely not welcome, as somebody raising a very young child who has been already, even though she doesn't know it, threatened by people just for her mere existence. It's hard. It's hard to think about pushing through all that, but maybe we can. Anyway, thank you for joining us. I'm going to outro the show here. Dolly is getting impatient, and I need to get the car to the shop. So, thanks so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you guys again on the show. And I'm going to outro and talk to the folks on the big screen. So enjoy the rest of your day, guys, and I will talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for having me, James.
And thank you again to our audience. I really appreciate you joining us this week and every week. We have one more show in the season, which will be next week. We'll be pre-recording it on Tuesday, but if you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like, or any topics that you'd like to cover, consider joining our Patreon, because Patreon is an easy way to get a hold of us directly. We'll be talking to Sebastian Mannheim with White Box Theater about their show Kia and Arc. And I really look forward to seeing you there again. I hope that you guys, even if you're trepidatious about the next 4 years, if you're trepidatious about even the next year, yes, things are going to change. Yes, things are going to happen. But please, look to your neighbor, look to your friends, look to the people that you are in community with. You might be surprised to find that they're actually interested in helping you, actually interested in your well-being. And you just might not have talked to them before. If you do talk to your friends and neighbors regularly, make sure to reach out to those that you don't necessarily think are your friends or neighbors. because it's important, even if people are not necessarily out reaching out to you, that you reach out to them. Anyway, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week, and see you next week. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.